You're watching ETN, where we don't do news, we just talk entertainment. Share and subscribe.
Hey guys, welcome to Entertainment Talk Nation. This is Rob. This video, we have a very, very special, momentous moment here on the Nation and on the ETN channel, as we have a special guest. I would like to introduce Mr. Matt Frank, and many of you know Mr. Frank is a fantastic artist, and he's done a lot of work, obviously, with Godzilla comic books as well as Transformers. And Matt, how are you today, man? Thanks for coming on.
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me. Man, you're making me blush. I appreciate that, though. I do. Thank you very much for having me. Well, we've been talking about this for a little while.
We have.
Finally carved out a little time to do it. So yeah, let's get into it.
And I appreciate that. I know you're busy. You go to a lot of cons and you get invited to a lot of different places. Because, you know, you are. I mean, I know you say you're blushing, but quite honestly, I mean, when it comes to, you know, the comic books and the Godzilla and the art, you're all over the place. You know what I mean? In fact, I think, I gotta be honest here, I did purge one of your images from your comics that I found on Google, and I used it as a thumbnail. So if that's a copyright infringement, let me know now so I can remove it.
No, as long as you're not putting it on shirts.
No.
God knows we get enough of that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. Nah, you're good, man. You're good.
Okay,
Thank
good.
you.
Awesome. I got I got the permission from the official man himself. We are good to go. All right.
Yeah.
So, now, first thing I want to do before we get into talking about the recent Godzilla stuff, which is great, and then ask you some questions about your work. I want you to take this opportunity to tell, because I know you were telling me, because one of the reasons it's been so long for us to finally get this going was you've been working on a project called Redman, and I kind of want you to tell us about that.
Oh yeah, thanks for asking. Redman is a really interesting, it's been a really interesting project because it's just the sort of thing that doesn't happen, just doesn't happen for someone like me, you know, somebody with these really specific, very niche interests, who sort of carved myself out this little corner of the fandom, and I don't know. It was a weird thing because, okay, for those who don't know what Redman is, people are like, "What the heck is he talking about?"
They thought you were talking about the rapper, you know?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh my God,
no.
he's collaborating with Redman.
Oh man, see, I think that would be great. It'll never happen, but it would be cool. He might actually like it. You know, I'd love to get a video of him actually sitting down and watching the old episodes. That would be he'd be like, man, I didn't even know this existed. No, but so basically the nutshell version is that Subaraya Productions, which is the company that owns Ultraman, back in the 60s and 70s, you know, with the success of Ultraman, they were enjoying a lot of success, and they were expanding their roster. They had a ton of different characters, most of them these giant superheroes, these giant monster fighting superheroes like Ultraman. Mm-hmm. So there was a kids variety show in, I think, 1972, 1973. I want to say 72, and that kids variety show had these little short live action segments produced by Subaraya called Redman, and it's essentially the same, kind of a stripped down version of Ultraman, where it's monsters and a superhero. They're running around the wilderness, just beating the crap out of each other, and there's no story. It's just he runs in, some monster is stumbling around the wilderness, some poor stunt actor in a, let's say, B-grade monster suit is stumbling around the wilderness. Here comes Redman to just savagely beat him up for just enjoying his day. But I mean, I want to say there's more to it than that, but there's not. But what's so interesting is just the bleakness of the cinematography of it.
Right.
Like it's a lot of handheld cameras, a lot of wide shots of these desolate areas outside of cities in Japan, like middle of the winter looking stuff, like it's just dry grass everywhere, barren hills and stuff, just and oddly beautiful in a way. Like every now and then there'll be a location shot and I'm like, this is haunting. And then Redman himself is just so savage and brutal when he's killing these monsters. So what happened was Super-Aya started uploading these episodes onto their YouTube channel, and Redman sort of became a low-key viral sensation, particularly among tokusatsu fans. Right. My editor over at Phase 6, which is the Japanese publishing company that has been they've been putting out my Godzilla comics over in Japan. They've been putting out Rulers of Earth over there. Oh, wow. So we already have this pre-established relationship. Mostly I was just doing covers for them. I was doing some signings, some low-key stuff. He saw these episodes, and he was like, and this is Andrew Hall, who he's the guy who runs it over there. He saw that and was like, we have to make a comic out of this. Like, we have to expand on this. This is such a weird, creativity-rich gold mine. And so they went to Super-Aya with the proposal. Super-Aya was like, yeah, sure, whatever you want, man. like not that, but they were just, I think there was a little bit of like, really? This is what you want to do? All right. But yeah, so they went to them with the proposal. We got it approved, and here we are. I'm one volume in. I'm working on volume 2 now.
Awesome, that's great. I mean, there's a lot of Ultraman fans out there. In fact, I've learned through doing the E.T.N. channel and all these Godzilla videos that I do that Ultraman is a lot bigger than I ever thought it was. And I've been learning, whatever I've learned of Ultraman and that kind of universe has been through people who view my channel, because I've never watched it when I was younger. So, but I could say right now, I did see some of the artwork online, and it looks beautiful. This,
for Redman?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you. I'm trying a really different approach with this, because I'm trying to harness that bleakness.
Right.
I'm trying to harness that very specific color palette and very specific look and feel. Because if you go too crazy, I don't want to betray the feeling of the original show, and I also don't want to betray the the mystery of it, because you're kind of like, what is going on? Like, who is this guy who's just savagely murdering monsters in the wilderness? and so that's those were kind of the questions. Now, I may not necessarily answer those questions in the comic, but I'll hint at stuff. There is a backstory. You just may not get the whole backstory. You may have to suss it out for yourself.
Well, yeah, and the thing is, I mean, that's ambiguity is, can work really well if it's obviously if it's done right. But there's nothing, there's nothing wrong. Because I can tell you one thing that I thought about when you were talking about that was, I know that you and other people worked on Godzilla in Hell, I think back in 2015.
Yeah,
and there is a good example of what you're kind of working on here in terms of, you don't really know what's going on. You don't really know the story. There's not dialogue there. It's all told through art and vision,
Yeah.
And so you're kind of would you say that there's maybe some of the same elements that are going into Redman from that, like from Godzilla in Hell?
Well, in my experience, when it came to Godzilla in Hell, I just did a cover for issue 2, which was Bob Eggleton's issue. And but I was very keyed in on what they were doing for the comic. Like, I was very aware of like, oh, okay, so this is what they're doing for it. I saw what they were going for, and in a lot of ways, there's a lot of comics out there that are told entirely through visuals. Ricardo Delgado's Age of Reptiles is a great example of a completely silent comic where all the sounds and stuff are just in your head.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, there is dialogue in Redman. It's just very sparse, and there's only a little bit of it here and there. And it's just it's just from a particular character's perspective. Now, I don't want to give away who or what that is, but there's a yeah.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, well, that kind of approach that you're talking about in terms of the minimal dialogue, that's the kind of stuff, along with the art, can definitely generate more interest and questions. So I like that. I like that ambiguity. But go ahead, you were gonna continue saying.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, yeah, it does help play up the ambiguity angle, and I knew there was a particular set of points and set of influences I wanted to draw from. But I do think Godzilla in Hell is a good example of the kind of that vibe I'm going for, because there's almost like a purgatory vibe to the show.
Yeah, well, and I've never seen the show, but that's the first thing that popped in my head when you were kind of describing what you were working on. So yeah, no, that sounds good. And
sure.
Didn't Volume 1 come out May 30th?
It came out in Japan, yeah, at the end of March, end of May. Maybe it was May. Crap, I don't remember. But it was a few months ago. It came out in Japan. And it was really well received. Like, we had a lot of chatter on Facebook. On Twitter. Twitter had a lot of hashtag Redman chatter. Couple of really pretty high profile manga artists and even some anime folks were some anime voice actors were talking about it, and it was pretty exciting. And my publisher was, of course, very happy. You know, Andrew was really happy about it.
Awesome.
Yeah. And now I'm working on Volume 2, and I do not have a whole lot of time to get this thing done. We want to have it done in time for Tokyo Comic-Con later this year, but which means that there's a lot of pages to be done and not a whole lot of time. So that's what I'm going to be doing.
I'm pretty sure that's something you're used to, huh?
Sure.
Always working on the crunch, so... but that's great. So, guys, you heard it, Redman. Check it out. You know, it's on YouTube. You know, and what I'll do is, before we leave with Matt later, I'll see if I can get a link from him. Maybe link it in the description so people can go check that out and continue supporting that. So
yeah, there is an English version coming out.
Oh, even better.
Yeah, that'll be through Night Shining Inc. That I'll give you the link for that too.
Okay, awesome. All right, so now in terms of, you know, we're gonna get. I know a lot of people watching now are gonna want to know what you think about all the Godzilla stuff, guys. We're gonna get to that.
Yeah.
One of the things I was most excited about talking to you about when I got you on here was the journey to becoming what is pretty much known as the Godzilla artist. Period, bar none. That's it. I mean, I know there's James Starko out there and stuff like that, and there's other people, but you are bar none the man when it comes to drawing Godzilla. So how did this, I mean, you are incredibly talented. There's no doubt you can draw other things. We do know that you've done some work on Transformers as well.
Sure.
But how did this, tell me a little bit about the journey from when you started really honing your skills and then becoming what's now known as the man to draw Godzilla.
Well, that's a really, it's, okay, hold on. I got to back up a little bit.
I got the tough questions, Matt.
No, you do. No. It's a lot to have to cover in a short amount of time. So I'll try to keep it succinct. So as a kid, I, obviously loved Godzilla, and when you're a kid, you draw mostly as just something to do with your hands. You're just trying to, you just something to keep you off the streets, as I like to tell people. And I don't know, just got kind of locked in on Godzilla as a kid, as most kids do when you like dinosaurs and stuff. But I think the real means towards getting, becoming associated with Godzilla actually started in the early 2000. It was in college for me. It would have been like between 2004 and 2008. I started just doing a crap load of Godzilla fan art. Like, I just kind of got this wild hair and decided, you know what, I'm kind of feeling creatively unfulfilled in my college courses. I was taking fine art classes at the time, which for those who don't know, fine art and illustration are not the same thing. Now both can inform the other, but they're not. There are different disciplines, and when you're a fine artist, it's a lot more. It's hard to explain in short detail, but basically, needless to say, I was feeling a little bit creatively unfulfilled, and I really wanted to I just wanted to draw the stuff I wanted to draw. So in my off time, I was doing a ton of Godzilla fan art, and that's when I started Godzilla Neo, which was the my little fan fiction series where I was just taking the Godzilla universe and trying to streamline it and turn it into one giant coherent kind of Marvel Ultimate universe. I was inspired by Ultimate Spider-Man a little bit. Awesome. So yeah, and I was just doing it for fun, and I started getting a lot of followers, and a lot of people started following me. And what I realized years later was, for a lot of people, and this is something that some people had told me, I was the only person doing Godzilla art at the time. Like, the franchise was essentially dead, or at least dormant. There were no movies coming out. Mm-hmm. There was Godzilla Unleashed in 2007, but it was just a video game, and it just kind of came and went. And there weren't going to be any comics until 2011. Right. So there was this huge chunk of time where all these Godzilla fans were basically getting blue-balled because they didn't have a fix. And people kept telling me, like, people always come up to me at conventions and tell me, oh man, you were the Godzilla source for a long time for like something resembling new material. And I thought, oh geez, that's pretty serious. So by having that kind of place in the fandom, that was very beneficial because eventually I got in with IDW. I worked with them a little bit on Transformers. That was sort of my gateway in. Was working on some Beast Wars stuff, some Transformers animated stuff. And then things kind of went quiet for a little bit. I piddled about in some other jobs. Wasn't really working heavily in comics at the time. And then at some point, I had made an association with Chris Mowry, who was he was a designer at IDW and an occasional writer. He and I had talked a little bit about doing Godzilla, and I was like, and at the time, I'm talking like, this is like 2008 or something. I was like, oh man, I'd love to do a Godzilla comic with you someday. And he's like, yeah, me too. What I didn't know was at the time, they were working on getting the license. Right. And he and Chris apparently desperately wanted to tell me, like, no, we're working on it. So, come 2010, they got the license and they reached out to me and said, hey, we want to get you involved. We worked with you before. We know that you can make your deadlines. You do good work. And we know you're a Godzilla fan. So let's get you in on this. So, yeah, that's kind of where it started.
That's awesome. And you know what? It's funny because, every time you talk to anybody, especially people who do, whether it's art or somebody who's doing an acting, whatever, you're literally living the dream. I mean, this is something that you did out of passion in college, and there you go, a couple of years later, and you're doing it as a profession, and that's just really awesome. And this is what it's all about, guys. Living the dream. Do what you love. You know what I'm saying?
It's true.
Yeah,
it's true. It's true.
And and I would say that absolutely, that gap between the end of the Millennial series leading into the Legendary series, you did feel that gap. I would definitely agree with that testament. When you go back and you look at all the art that you did and all the work that you did, both, on your own and then obviously landing with IDW. So, I think that's a little unsung. So, thank you for that.
I really appreciate that because I look back personally on that period of time, and I look back at the art I was making, and I can see like all of the mistakes, like, because it's been like 10 years since I did that stuff. Right. And I'm looking back on it and I'm like, oh man, like this is wrong. I should have done this differently. But you think about it and you're also kind of like, yeah, but it doesn't really matter because you did it when you did it. My style appealed to a lot of younger people, a lot of people my age and younger, because I grew up on a lot of anime and comics and cartoons and stuff. So I really try to apply that mentality to Godzilla. without going too crazy with it, although I did go a little nuts every now and then. But, you know, it makes things, keeps things fresh, keeps things fun.
Yeah, and you know what? You're probably your toughest critic, because I don't think a lot of people back then were complaining.
No, yeah, you're not wrong. And I mean, and now I look at other guys now, and to be fair, that's the thing is, like, I will admit, whenever I go to a convention, I'm one of the only people there who has the sheer volume of Godzilla stuff that I do, because you know, a lot of other artists like Godzilla and they'll do Godzilla stuff. You know, like you said, James Stokoe is an amazing artist, really transcendent in a lot of ways. Godzilla is just one part of what he does, though. It's just one aspect of his work. For me, Godzilla has been the bedrock of what I've done for my entire career. I always attribute the fact that I have a mortgage to my love of Godzilla. You know, and then you got guys like Bob Eggleton, who's you know, obviously an incredible artist as well. One of my, you know, a personal friend. He calls me the son he never had. But he's just also, like, he's a painter, and his work takes time, and he just has a different output and a different market, so to speak. Right. Like, he's not tooling around Comic-Cons like I am every other week. But he doesn't have to, because he's Bob Eggleton. You do whatever he wants. I keep telling him that. I'm like, he'll be frustrated with something or something, and he'll be like, oh, you know, this painting's not working for me, or oh, I'm feeling kind of down because this or that and the other. And I'll just sit there and I'll tell him, like, you're Bob blank word Eggleton. You don't have to worry about anything. Anyway. So, you know, and obviously Jeff Zornow and all these other fantastic artists that I've worked with over the years. But good.
No, that's awesome. And you know, like I said, it's just it's amazing to see or to hear the story behind, because I'm obviously very familiar with your work, and everybody who isn't really. I always wanted to know how it got to that point, because, you know, like you said, IDW at the time was negotiating for the license, and I know through just, you know, the experience of doing the channel more than anything, that they are very particular about their intellectual property in Japan. And I thought to myself, wow, I wonder, not only is he one of the premier Godzilla artists for comic books, stuff like that, you know, a lot of people know him, a lot of people are familiar with his work, but how did he, I mean, you talk about being at the right place at the right time. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, no kidding.
I mean, you know, to be talking about that, and then at the same time, the company is actually working on getting the license. I mean, damn, talk about, you know, stepping on shit. You know?
Well, yeah. well, it's so funny you say that, because you're right. I mean, there was a period of time in the early 2010. Man, I had you know, like a lot of young people getting out of college these days, I had to go move back in with my folks for a little bit. And, you know, and then there's nothing really to be ashamed of. You know, sometimes you got to do what you got to do. I worked in a Mexican food restaurant for one whole week, and man, I tell you, that's why I always tip minimum 15%. Tip 15 to 20%, people. Come on, that job sucks. Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, no, but at the time, I didn't really know what my plan was, because I knew there were certain jobs I wanted and certain things I wanted to work on, but it's hard to transition from fan art to professionalism, especially when the majority of your fan art is for a very particular thing. Right. And that's why for most people it doesn't really work out that way. But that being said, I remember I did manage to move back and get an apartment, find a roommate, get an apartment, work a part-time job, you know, get back on my feet. And in that time, I actually started working for an app development company, just doing like little BS, just sketches for them, because they just needed like iPad screens and stuff, you know, like just again, right place, right time, and it paid the bills. So I did it, and I was in New York for a couple of weeks, and then I came back home, and almost immediately after coming home was when my buddy Chris from Toho Kingdom called me up, and said, "Hey, Matt, you know IDW, that company you worked with?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "They just got the Godzilla license." And I'm like, "What?"
Oh.
So, yeah. So I ran home. This is one of my favorite stories. I was actually walking to the mailbox to check my mail. When he called me, I turned around and ran back to my apartment. Immediately got on my email and fired off an email to Chris Ryle, the editor-in-chief at IDW at the time, and said, "Hey, Chris, you remember me? You remember how much I like Godzilla?" Mm-hmm. And he wrote me back and was like, "Matt, I'm at New York Comic Con. I'll call you when I get back."
That's awesome.
Yeah, Chris was always a trooper. He was always quick to respond, and that was always appreciated. He's not with IDW anymore. I believe he's with another startup or something. But yeah, he does good work.
That's awesome. Now, speaking of Chris, going back to Chris Mergerhanger, who now on one hand I have to thank him because he obviously helped set this up, but on the other hand, I gotta keep, I kind of want to give him a swift kick in the ass. Because
that's just me every day.
Yeah, right. One of the things I told you when we were talking on Facebook when we were trying to set this up was, God damn it, this should have happened like 5 years ago. You know
yeah.
Because I was talking to Chris the whole time during that whole 2014 run. He's the one who told me that you were going to interview Gareth Edwards before you actually did it. Because Chris loves... And some people here on the channel know Chris because Chris has been on my live streams before in the past.
Nice.
And he's always been very cool and this and that. And I told him, I said, man, I would really like to interview some people who are in the Godzilla community that are, have. And he was like, "Oh yeah, well you can, why don't you contact Matt?" I'm like, "Can I just do that?" Like I'm asking him, like I don't know, you know what I mean? Because to me, you're like Matt Frank, you're the comic artist. Like I don't just. To me, you don't just roll up on people. I just don't normally do that.
Sure.
So he's like, "No, he's like, oh, he's a teddy bear, man. Just message him." And I'm like, "What?" And for like a half hour, we're debating back. And I'm like, "I don't know, Chris. I don't know. I don't feel too comfortable." He's like, so he said, "I'll just do it. Don't worry about it." And I did it. And sure enough, it all worked out. But I'm like, wait a minute. Why didn't you tell me this back in 2014? It would have been great to have you on here.
I could have just done that.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's funny. Oh, that's funny.
It's funny because as we spoke and as we see that we roll in the same circles because obviously you've been friends with Chris for a while.
Sure.
I know that you're well acquainted with Billy Dubose from Godzilla Battle Royale.
Billy.
Oh my
yep.
God, man. He did an interview with me when he had that come out, and we
nice.
had a lot of fun. He was even on a couple of my podcasts. So and it's like. We've rolled around in these circles, and it's only now that we finally got together to have a nice little conversation about Godzilla. So it's like this is like 5 years in the making. You know what I mean? So
sure.
Now,
go ahead.
No, go ahead. You go.
No, I was just gonna say I totally get that. Like I totally get that. Like I don't want to bother this person that I really admire and stuff, and or this person that I want to talk to, but I know they're a professional and. I don't want to take up their time or yada, yada, yada. But, you never, the worst thing that can happen is they'll say no, right. or they won't say anything because they're too busy. Because, I used to really think that way. And now I'm kind of like, whatever, because well, granted, I have the advantage of like having been in the industry for a while now. I know people, and if I really want to get in touch with somebody, I'll just fire off a message. I fired off a message over to Adam Wingard, the director of Godzilla vs. Kong, on Twitter last year, and before he kind of went dark to work on the movie, and he and I had a nice little back and forth, and he was like, "Oh yeah, dude, I like your work," and so I sent him some comics, and he was tweeting out how he was reading Godzilla Legends #1 while he was doing sound editing and stuff, and I'm like, that's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
That's pretty cool.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
See that. All right, but it's a little different for you because like I said, you drew the comic. See, I don't have that. I have a channel. It's like, oh yeah, just check. And I got some crazy shit on my channel. It's not the show. And being the fact that I'm supposed to be, fair and balanced in terms of my critique. Some of these movies, I may not have given the best review in the world. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I'm not going to go and ask this guy for an interview.
Man, but I got to tell you, like, anybody who anybody who declines an interview from someone who gave their work a bad review, I don't know. I always kind of think like, come on, guys. There's worse stuff to get worked up over. Like, I don't know. If the person, especially the person who's reaching out to you, it's like, I don't know. But you are right, though. Like, it can be a little intimidating, especially if you're not like neck deep in this world. But like I said, it doesn't hurt to ask. Yeah. It never hurts to ask.
And to be honest, and just so people know, you have been 100% super duper friendly from the moment I messaged you like 2 months ago. You're like, hey, Rob, reach out to me. Hey, what's up, man? How you doing? I'm sorry, I'm just super busy and this and this. It hasn't been like you haven't cut me short and none of that. You've been very, very pleasant. And and now, because I know you're a busy man, so before we end this, I want to talk about. I want to hear your thoughts about the last week of all this Godzilla stuff. From people want to hear. They want to know. You know, and if they go to your
people want to know.
The people want to know.
Thank you for watching E.T.N. Click here to watch more content. Or you can click here to become an E.T.N. patron. Don't forget to leave a comment. Also, make sure you like and share this video. If you want to know when the next video is up, click the notification bell next to the subscribe button. And most of all, make sure to click that subscribe button for regular content.